Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sage Space, the podcast where we explore real conversations around aging, caregiving, and how we can all better support independence at home. I'm Kathy Minter, co-founder and CEO of Wisdom, and your host today, joined today by my co-host, Patty Leach, who's our communications director and caregiver advocate at Wisdom's sister website, Help for Aging in Place. And we are both really looking forward to our conversation today. And we're bringing together two of the people behind a really exciting documentary from PBS and WETA that explores caregiving in America. So Tom Chiodo, executive producer of special projects at WETA and PBS, and WETA is PBS's flagship station in Washington, and Jordan Page, who's the project coordinator for the film. Tom, we'd love to hear a little bit about you and your background and sort of how you found your way to PBS and WETA and a little bit of what's behind this project.
Thank you, Kathy and Patty, and thank you for having us here today. Well, my life as an older person, have had 4 careers, and my original career was in healthcare and public health, first working with children and then adults, then moving into the nonprofit space and then into television at PBS. I've been blessed in my life to work on some extraordinary projects trying to eradicate childhood hunger, working with a wonderful organization dealing on the topic of cancer, the organization Stand Up to Cancer. I've worked in a lot of spaces like this. And then during my time at PBS and prior to that, I've worked with various networks and cablers that have developed programs specifically in healthcare. So my life's sort of come full circle with a few careers in between, public relations and writing plays. But this has been a joy during my time at PBS, to help develop a campaign called WellBeings. WellBeings at wellbeings.org is a public media platform that we created at WETA, where we present major documentary series and digital short films and major impact campaigns that are both outreach around the country through our 330 plus PBS stations and the communities they're in, along with dozens of national sponsors and partners who work with us, where we seek to raise awareness, to educate, to reduce stigma and discrimination, and change the national conversation about critical health needs in America. So we have been producing these types of films I've been a decade and a half doing that with WETA and at WETA, and on topics like cancer and genetics. And we launched during the pandemic the WellBeings campaign with a film that I executive produced with Ken Burns called Hiding in Plain Sight, Youth Mental Illness, where we addressed the youth mental health crisis in America. The next film after that is Caregiving, which we're going to talk about today. But I have another film after this that is dealing with dementia called Defeating Dementia, one on adult mental health, one on rural health. We're addressing all of these projects with a lot of support around them, utilizing the resources of public media as well as our national sponsors and partners. So how we came upon this particular project, I often will say 30 years or so ago, cancer came out of the closet. Before then, when my grandmother was diagnosed, no one talked about it. No one said the word. The patient didn't hear it. The family never used the word. The New York Times never used the word cancer when they were describing an ailment of the chest wall, when they were describing breast cancer. They didn't even use the term. When my mom was diagnosed, we talked about it more. During the pandemic, I think everyone would agree, mental health started to eke its way out of the closet, where we started to talk about it. We are storytellers at public media, and we're conveners. If we talk about it, then we have a chance to deal with it. We have a chance to get help and to find resources. So it was very natural for me to see, and our team and colleagues and our co-executive producer, Bradley Cooper, that caregiving was a topic we needed to address. Why? Because there are 105.6 million unpaid family caregivers in our nation, and there are 5.4 million young people under the age of 18 who are caregivers. That really was the seed that got us to move forward and take on this topic. And it is a crisis of caregiving within a healthcare crisis, within an economic crisis. I'll stop there.
Yeah. And Tom, it's so interesting because it is something that you don't realize people just didn't, it was a topic that just wasn't talked about in the past and how much it really is coming to the forefront. And I'm also interested, Jordan, your observations coming in, you have sort of Tom has sort of been doing this for a longer time, let's say, and your observations, what are some of your observations or what you've learned sort of observing this coming together? And I'm really interested, Tom, to hear how this specific project had come together, especially with, someone with such a prominent name like Bradley Cooper and how that helped, in terms of producing it.
Well, coming in, working on the project, it came on as an intern while we were still in R&D. And over the past 2.5 years, as I've progressed both in my career, I've also gotten to watch this project grow from, fundraising and our plans and our ideas and visions for the series to becoming a series that is now streaming currently and is premiering on broadcast later this month. The film has definitely connected with so many audiences and communities. I think that's the main takeaway from the project is everyone that we talk to, everywhere that we show the film, people come up to us afterward, journalists, other celebrities, even other people just like you and I come to us and have their own caregiving stories. And the project has allowed people both through our WellBeings platform to share their own stories online, but also to share their stories with each other and with us and create a conversation that's taking place in the real world.
Yeah. And I think, Patty, would love to hear your observations too. When I was watching the film, one of the things that struck me was, this, obviously first of all, you really showed so many different aspects of caregiving and the spectrum of caregiving. And a lot of the history was a lot of things I hadn't known before. I really learned quite a bit about some of the other things that went behind it over the decades. But in so many cases where you think that caregiving might kind of rip people apart, or relationships, what I was really touched by was so many of the struggles actually brought people much closer together through that caregiving journey. And so, Tom, what were your feelings in bringing this particular project together? Like what were some of the, moments behind the scenes that maybe you don't,
I think that you hit on something very important. On June 25th, with one of our sponsors, we're celebrating the joy in caregiving. And I recall I've been a caregiver 4 times in my life, for my mom, for my 2 brothers, for my son. One of the behind the scenes are when as you said, when you watch this film, we give the 100-year history dating back to the Great Depression. We know that caregiving is born out of crisis. And when it happens to you, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what your resources are, you feel alone. You feel you are in crisis. You don't know where to turn. You don't know. If you're a parent, you don't always know you're a caregiver unless someone says you are a caregiver. And born out of crisis, so people come together. And it's very empowering when you find out you're not alone. As Jordan mentioned, we have on the wellbeings.org site, we have a We Are Wellbeing story wall where any one of your listeners can share their story. They can write in, they can send a video, they can send a message, they can tell their story. We want people to see their lives up on that screen. That's really what it's ultimately about. Behind the scenes, for Bradley Cooper, his dad was diagnosed with lung cancer and has since passed. But Bradley had the rare opportunity to be a caregiver, among others, for his dad. And he said he idolized him as a kid. He used to dress up like him going to school, make fun of him. He said, you go from that to, as an adult, bathing your parent, who you love so much and admire. It's tough. And he says in the film, caregivers are heroes. They're heroes. They're just extraordinary human beings and how to cope with crisis, to multitask, to be creative, to figure out how to hold down a career, how to be a sandwich generation caregiver where you may be caring for a parent and a child, how to stay whole and healthy, how to maintain your mental health and well-being. Self-care is important because we know that caregivers can have a high mortality rate. Their health and mental health are at risk because it isn't easy, but it is for the public good. I believe it is not only a noble cause, but we are made more whole when we are a caregiver.
Yeah.
I just love that. And I love that clearly that caregivers are the unsung hero these days. And one of our messages at Help for Aging in Place is, I think, similar to one that I heard in the documentary, which is caregiving, while it requires so much of the individual, doesn't have to be looked at as a burden. It can be looked at as an opportunity. And one of the things that I loved and I thought that was really brought to life, with the spectrum of caregiving that you provided, was how caregiving can really increase the sort of and enhance the relationship and the love that the caregiver and the receiver has. So was there any inspiration behind who you chose to highlight in the film in terms of caregivers? We know there was kind of people from all walks of life.
We cast a wide net. Our filmmaker, Christopher Durrance, in our research and development phase, where we looked at who receives care, who provides care. Now, we know the majority of caregivers are women. The majority of those women are women of color. But like Bradley and myself, there are men that are caregivers more and more, and there are millennials that are stepping up. We see online lots of stories. But we also wanted to address caregiving for older Americans, caregiving that is being provided by younger Americans. We have a group that did a survey in the Rhode Island schools, and the students reported that 40% of them self-reported that they were caregivers. Now, what if we did a survey all around the country in all the schools and asked, are you a caregiver for a loved one? Maybe schools would not punish students and send them to the principal's office because they're asleep one morning because they were up caregiving for a loved one. Maybe they would help them and provide support. That's why we wanted to address that. We address veterans in caregiving. We address mental health, chronic illness, acute diseases. Caregiving is really multifaceted, as I mentioned to Kathy earlier. If you're caregiving for children with a chronic illness or an acute illness, you don't think of it as being a caregiver until someone says that to you. But I have found over my work in particularly public health, there are parents that can do what nurses and so many other professionals can do at home for their own children, loved ones, parents, siblings, and spouses. I remember legislation that I once worked on in a previous career for children that were dependent upon respirators. And it cost $1 million to keep them in a hospital and an ICU, cost $75,000 to keep them at home and provide home health care, but they would lose their benefits because their parents' income was deemed to them. But parents could disassemble and put back together a respirator, and they knew how to do all of the things you do. Well, you can apply that to just about everything when it comes to caregiving. You don't really know when to turn when. If I say to you today, and we're related, that I've been diagnosed with dementia or a critical illness that's going to require you to figure out how to help me and live or be in the phases of the end of my life. And I think that those things inspire us, and we cast a wide net, and it's been extraordinary, the caregivers who have opened their homes to us to talk about it and to share their stories. It's also for all of us that do talk about it. And I never participate in a speaking engagement or panel discussion or screening where I don't ask the audience to raise their hands if they've ever been a caregiver. We just did it the other night in Washington, D.C. at George Washington University, and probably 90% of the audience raised their hands. And that's so telling everywhere we go. And it's shocking when you speak to a young group of people and discover they're caregivers too. You don't know that information. So I don't know, both of you who I'm meeting today for the first time, I don't know what your last year has been like and what you have confronted. We need to be sensitive to one another, address these issues, and also provide the safety net that we all need. We deserve it. We deserve to provide good care for one another.
So much of that resonates with me because, I am the caregiver to my 85-year-old mom and, represent a lot of people who are taking care of their older adults, particularly those that want to age in place or stay in
Yes.
their own homes.
Yes.
And I heard in the documentary that statistics, 10,000 or 11,000 people per day are turning 65. So the
Yes.
biggest population now is moving into this retirement age with really not enough people to support them and not enough sort of public, as you said, safety nets out there to kind of help them do so. Can you kind of comment on
Oh,
that and what your
well,
message is?
I'm over 65 and I think about it all the time. Not only do I think about how will I be cared for if I need it, but I also think about I don't wish to age the same way my parents or grandparents aged. It's a different world. It's a different time. We live more active lives. We live longer. Veterans who come back from the longest war we had, Afghanistan and Iraq, 20 years, with medical science, live longer. Vietnam, we turned away. So many people turned away from veterans. We need to care for one another. We stand up for one another. We fight wars for one another. We need to have, when we need care, whether it's young or old, we need that sort of care. So yeah, that's a great point, Patty. And we need to reassess it. There's a lot of technical and medical advancement, AI, and so many things that can help in the caregiving role. I applaud you for caring for your dad. I think about the cultures within our country. For some, it's natural to care for a loved one. Intergenerational living and work and care is natural. For others, I'm too busy. I can't do it. I have a career.
Right.
So many people are sort of wondering. And I would bet that so many of us don't even think about, much less having a will or a trust, having long-term care policy so that we can afford it. Uh, Home
I,
health care is extremely expensive.
yeah, Tom, I wanted to kind of, and Jordan, I want to ask you this question too from two different vantage points. So if you were to say, fast forward 10 years from now, right? And thinking about the work that you're doing right now, the message that you're getting out, how would you like to see things change in 10 years? If you think about how, right? And you look back on what the next documentary, and I'm sure, Tom, you're still going to be at it in terms of producing these films, but what would you like to see in 10 years in an ideal world about how
Well,
this has
you're
changed?
a lot younger than me, and you utilize even so much more technology than I do. What do you see ahead? You have parents, you have siblings. What do you see ahead?
Definitely, as Tom mentioned, kind of the future of technology, the future of AI, how it's become integrated into a lot of our daily lives. And I imagine that will only be more so in the next decade or so. So I hope and I think that that technology can make these care resources more accessible, can make care help relieve some of the burden on caregivers, especially those who are trying to balance a life of their own, to try to take care of a family, and support each other. So I think hopefully that mental health resources for caregivers, software that helps caregivers organize and communicate with doctors, create a care plan, and really advocate on behalf of their care recipient who they're supporting, that would be the goal for me. And I hope that those resources are, if not free, but accessible to as many people as possible and easy to understand and integrate into our everyday lives.
It's
Yeah.
really estimated that there are, the exact number escapes me for the moment, but billions and billions of dollars every year lost in income to unpaid family caregivers, lost in our economy. Do we have compassionate caregiving policies? One of our partners is SHRM. SHRM is an organization of HR, human resources professionals. We have at all of our jobs, big or little companies. And they have 340,000 members. And they joined us to talk about compassionate caregiving policies. I'm so proud that at WETA, because of caregiving, we created a compassionate caregiving policy at WETA for all of our employees, our HR department did. And we now, if I need caregiving time, I can take it off. I don't use my time, I can give it to my colleague like Jordan. In addition to which, we talk to people think about doing that. People are afraid to talk about their mental health at work. If I need mental health time, am I going to lose my job? Are you going to not promote me? If I need caregiving, you're going to say, oh, he's out too much. We need to address those things because if you have a healthy workforce, you have a stronger company. I don't care whether you're a foundation or a corporation or what. So those are the types of issues where we try to address in the film and show how it's evolved in our nation and why. For instance, during World War II, women started to work in factories to help support the war effort. Now, women have children and they don't have child care. That's how child care support evolved in our nation. We can get smarter. We need to get smarter. And I don't think we realize the level of the need. I know I mentioned it's estimated there's 105.6 million unpaid family caregivers, more than 5 million paid caregivers in our nation. But globally, it's estimated at about 697 million, when in fact that number is probably between 1 and 2 billion when you look at other countries. Now, some countries address the issue in a much stronger way with caregiving communities, individuals with dementia, and how it helps. Listen, we have many advancements, but we need to take advantage of them and apply them. That's the good and bad of social media.
And it was interesting, to really think about the hard fact of that the economic success and economic outlook is so tied to a solid foundation in caregiving. And when that solid foundation in caregiving goes away, how closely those two are tied together, especially in the United States. And that was sort of something that you don't necessarily think about, but it's so important and linked.
You could be wiped out in healthcare costs in minutes. It's not inexpensive to have to pay for caregivers. If you're not healthy and you need to care for someone, a loved one, you can't care for them, right? So your own mental health and well-being is critical. In terms of social media as caregivers, there's a young man in his 30s in the film who's caring for his wife who had a stroke and was diagnosed with a cancerous tumor, and their 8-year-old child, and they're in love and married, and this happens, and he's a caregiver, and he gives up his job because he's going to care for his wife and kid over and above the job. And he even says, as a guy, it's kind of hard to give up your career. That's your identity. So someone in an audience at one of our screenings said to him, Matt, well, do you go to therapy? What do you do? And he said, I'm a guy. He said, no, I don't go to therapy. But he said, I found my people online. And he called from the film. He went out on social media and said, hey, anybody else out there like me? And that is how he found his people. And that is what we need to do. Sometimes it's a stranger that gets you through something. Sometimes it's friends. Sometimes it's coworkers. But it is nothing. It shouldn't have stigma associated with it. And we should not be afraid to say, I'm struggling as a caregiver.
Yeah, and just like with mental illness, it is so amazing the work that you're doing, really putting caregiving on the public health agenda, because I think it's always just been looked at as something maybe someone's doing, and like you said, it's behind the scenes, or someone might not even recognize themselves actually as doing this job as a caregiver. Do you have a message that you could give to any caregivers out there, whether it's for an older adult or whether they're taking care of their spouse or whether younger? Is there kind of a key theme or a key message that you'd like them to know?
It's take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Do self-care.
Self-care.
Talk about it. Talk about it with others. Share your story. Share your story with us. Lots and lots of people will see it, and they'll find out they're not alone. It's when you find out you're not alone that you're empowered to do what it is you have to do. That's really the message, I would say. I mean, there are many, many surprises when you see what people do to survive the process. It's a very challenging thing. But I guess a final thought, when my mom was in her final 6 months of life and the doctor said, there's no more we can do except keep you comfortable, I didn't know what to say next. But what I did say was, you never know, Mom, what your best day on earth will be. And we had many best days in those 6 months. And if you're a caregiver or thinking about a caregiver, you say, oh, I can't stop my job and care for X so-and-so. Yes, you can. And 2, you'll never regret it. You'll have memories that will hold you up. You'll be your better human for doing it.
Wow. Well, Tom, with that, that's an amazing just thought to leave our listeners with. But just quickly tell us just where can we watch this documentary? I know it's out already streaming, but tell us just a little bit more about what's coming up, where people can find information, how they can, any sort of call to action in terms of how to get more involved and what's next.
There are, the 2-hour documentary is currently streaming on PBS.org and the PBS app. It's also on Amazon Prime. It will be available no paywall for more than 6 months on free video on demand. The film will premiere on broadcast on all 330 PBS stations in prime time, June the 24th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central. Check your local listing. Your local PBS station. Ask if they're doing something. There are hundreds of screenings that are happening throughout this entire year around the country. If you want to watch a short film, go to wellbeings.org. We have 18 additional short 5-minute films on various topics around caregiving, from faith-based to caregiving for the unhoused, all sorts of topics that will give you a hint about what we're doing. And you can find resources that way and action steps through both WellBeings, resources through your local PBS stations.
That's great. And Jordan, for maybe someone who's younger that might not tune into PBS on a Sunday night or watch, what would be your reflections on why someone should watch this that might be younger or not even a caregiver yet?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing about this project is that care is universal. And, if you're not a caregiver, you'll be a caregiver or you'll need care eventually. Someone in your life, someone in your family is caring for someone, or they could be caring for you. There are young people who are receiving care, who are giving care. And the film is available both, as Tom mentioned, on streaming for those audiences who may not be watching broadcast. We also have our digital short films that are available on our WellBeings platform. Some will be available on the PBS YouTube channel as well. So we're engaging with social media, we're engaging with influencers, bringing the film and the stories about care to younger audiences. And we hope that in doing so, younger people will continue to share it and continue that conversation as the film lives on.
That's wonderful. Well, we'll be sure to share the details on our, social media as we publish this out. But I thank you both so much. It's been great to talk to you. Congratulations on the documentary, and best of luck. And come back on your next project. We'd love to have you back as a guest.
I want to leave you with a final thought from former First Lady Rosalind Carter, who founded the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers. Her family continues the legacy today. She stated to Congress and to so many people over the last 4 or 5 decades that there are only 4 types of people in this world: those that have been caregivers, those that are caregivers, those that will be caregivers, and those who will need care.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again, both of you, and success of the documentary and all the important work you're doing.
Thanks for the work you both do.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.